standing in front of the same judge who 2 decades ago sentenced them to life in prison for rape and murder. Nevaeh Coleman and Daryl Fulton listened Friday as prosecutors updated their case. Cook County Assistant State's Attorney Eric Sussman said his office had reviewed all DNA testing in the case and would not seek a retrial for the men, who were released from prison last week. Family of the men applauded before being shushed by a sheriff's officer. Judge Dennis Porter looked at Coleman and Fulton, informed them the charges were dropped, and said, "You're free to go." With that, Coleman and Fulton's 23-year saga of imprisonment prompted by alleged forced confessions was over. On November 20, Nevaeh Coleman walked out of Hill Correctional Center a free man after having been behind bars for almost 23 years. Coleman and Daryl Fulton were sentenced to life in prison 2 decades ago for a brutal 1994 rape and murder they have long denied committing. Recent DNA testing indicates they may be innocent. Antonio Perez / Chicago Tribune. On November 20, Nevaeh Coleman walked out of Hill Correctional Center a free man after having been behind bars for almost 23 years. Coleman and Daryl Fulton were sentenced to life in prison 2 decades ago for a brutal 1994 rape and murder they have long denied committing. Recent DNA testing indicates they may be innocent. Antonio Perez / Chicago Tribune. While recent forensic testing was enough to free both men, prosecutors said Friday it is not enough to pursue new charges in the case even though the evidence matches someone in the National Crime Scene DNA database. DNA detected on an article of clothing worn by the victim in this case matched the profile of an individual whose DNA profile was in the National CODIS database, State's Attorney's Office spokesman Robert Foley said in a statement. This evidence was considered in the State's Attorney's Office's decision not to retry Mr. Fulton or Mr. Coleman. However, the State's Attorney's Office has concluded that the available evidence, including the DNA evidence, is not sufficient to support a prosecution of any other individual for this crime. Antoine Ica Bridgman disappeared in April 1994 after her 20th birthday celebration, and her body was found weeks later in the basement of the building where Coleman lived in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. Semen from Bridgman's underwear matches someone linked to at least 3 assaults, prosecutors have said previously. That person has not been publicly identified. Fulton, 50, and Coleman, 48, were released from prison last week after partial DNA testing indicated they might be innocent, but the possibility of a retrial lingered until Friday's decision. Moments after the court hearing, Fulton's mother embraced her son and cried. Coleman hugged a cousin as his sisters stood nearby. "The sun is shining, it's a beautiful day," Fulton said in the courthouse lobby. "It's a great time to be free. It's been a long time coming." Coleman said he was relieved by the prosecutor's decision. "I don't want to come back to this courtroom no more," Coleman said.